Hi, here we're doing The Quest, and we're talking about a cumulative case having to do with God's existence. This is the third part. It talks about our minds. It talks about rational awareness. When I want to say to somebody that our rational awareness is not material, you can call it soul, you can call it spirit, you can call it mind, you can call it whatever you want, but it's not material. Uh, they probably would say something like this. I'm a materialist. I believe in what you see is what you get. I look around, I believe in what I experience. I see rocks, I see trees, I see cars and houses and all that kind of stuff. I know they exist. I don't ordinarily see angels or demons or gods or spiritual entities or a spiritual realm. A lot of that is just inferred as far as I'm concerned. And it just seems like fairy tales to me. That's not real to me. What I see is the real world, the solid world. And I have sympathy with that. I can see where they're coming from. And I'm going to come back to that later on. If you stop and look around, you look to the left, you swivel to the right, and you see a little panorama of whatever is surrounding you. You are aware of that. This awareness is the most wonderful thing in the world, and it's also the most taken for granted thing in the world. Nobody is surprised that they're aware of their surroundings like this. But it's amazing when you think about it. This is called the standpoint of consciousness. It's not just I am this, I am that, based upon what you think about yourself, about your abilities and talents, your ego, all that stuff. It's not that. It is just that standpoint of consciousness that is happening right now. You're also aware not just of your surroundings. You're also aware of your other senses, of course, of your smelling and tasting and all that, and hearing. But you're also aware of your thoughts. You're aware of what you're thinking about now. You're aware of what you were thinking about a little while ago. You have memories of that. You have plans for the future. This awareness is pretty comprehensive, and it is the center of your life. This is why you feel like you're the center of your universe. So this rational awareness, is it really a material thing? Can it be reduced or even produced by material things? Alvin Plantinga brought this up in a lecture, and he mentioned Leibniz, famous German philosopher, and that Leibniz had a machine thought experiment. He said, imagine a giant machine like this one in the upper right here. It has gears, and it has big posts, and it has wooden things, and it's all moving around. And it's in this big room. And as it moves around, do you think that this could produce awareness by the movement of its parts? It seems not. It seems like if you have something that's moving around, it's just moving around. It can move around fast or slow or sideways or anything. No matter how complex it is, it's not going to produce awareness. It's a different kind of thing. What if you made it really small, like a sugar cube, and you had thousands of them? Would that change the equation? And I say no, because matter cannot produce awareness by virtue of the movement of its parts. It's not just that I can't see how that could happen. It's that I can see how it can't happen. It's like asking, does the number 7 weigh 3 pounds? This is Plantinga's illustration. And the answer, of course, is no. It doesn't weigh 3 pounds. It's not because it weighs a different amount. It's not even because it weighs 0 pounds. It's because weight has nothing to do with the concept of the number 7. It's a different kind of thing. And that's the argument for the rational awareness not being material. That seems to me to be a very, very strong argument. But there's more. We are also rational. We're not just aware, just observers. We are rational in that we think about things, we draw inferences, we do calculations in our head, we make decisions and draw conclusions. And so that rationality, how is that produced? Okay, there are at least 4 objections to this, and we have to take them one by one and see how strong they are, because these are the reasons why people reject the idea that this awareness is non-material. The first one is neurology. As I'm sure you know, neurology has discovered correlations between our brain states and our mind. Right? Our actual physical structure can be mapped, and they can put electrodes in your brain to produce sensations and maybe even thoughts. I don't know. These correlations have been mapped more and more and more diligently, and stronger and stronger and stronger, until they say the mind, this awareness, is the brain. It's the brain in action. That's it. I corresponded briefly with a guy who had a brain injury when he was young. He was in a car accident, and he knew up close and personal just how frustrating it was to not be able to think like he used to think. And he became convinced from that experience that the mind and the brain are the same thing, that we are just physical beings. And neurology, neuroscience, was one of the reasons why he thought this. But we know in business analytics that correlation does not mean. In business analytics, correlation is not the same thing as a cause, much less identity. You can have correlations forever and not show a cause. You can have correlations forever and not show identity. Also, caveman knew that if he hit somebody on the head with a club hard enough, it's going to impair his mind. But there's an additional answer to that too. I think this is a great answer myself. But there's an additional answer. It's an analogy between the musician and want them to be real thinking machines and really aware. But what do we know about computers? Well, now that I've worked with computers for many years, I kind of know how they're built. I kind of know how they work. I've taken classes in it. I've seen it in operation. First of all, you have to realize that there's 2 kinds of rationality, and they get mixed up. They get mixed up where we think of computers as thinking machines, right? There is on the behavior level in doing calculations, and then there's the awareness level. Now, a hand calculator can be more rational than you can as far as doing calculations, and it gets it right every time. But the hand calculator doesn't know, it doesn't see that 2 and 2 is 4 and not 5. It doesn't see it. You see that 2 and 2 is 4 and not 5. That's the difference. It just calculates. Now, a computer works in its essence on these logical pathways where electricity is shot through the system, and it has these little pathways that it goes through, and you have inputs, you have outputs. And the meaning of what's happening depends upon the design by the engineer to say that this output means this and this output means that. The way they design it is, here's an AND and an OR gate. Here's an example here. If you look from the bottom left, if you look at this picture, you have two. So green means true, and orange means false in this. So on the left, you have two pathways where they are true. You can make them on or off, or true or false, whatever you want to do. Let's say both of those are on, and if they're both on, the AND gate will produce a true, right? If they're both true, it'll produce a true. And on the right, if one of them is false, and then it'll produce a false, because they both have to be true to be true. And then you have on the left you have a true, and on the right you have a false. And then the OR gate says if either one of them is true, the product is true. In combining gates like this, this is how they do logical operations, and this is how they do addition and subtraction. If they can do addition and subtraction, they can do multiplication and division. And if we build ourselves a giant computer, this is an actual photograph, an aerial photograph of rivers. We could take a giant box, and we could carve channels in this box, in the bottom of the box, and pour water through it. And we could have the water be controlled by AND and OR gates in exactly the same way that computers do. And theoretically, although it wouldn't be very practical, theoretically we could make a gigantor computer just with water and do simple calculations at least. So think about that. We could do calculations just with the flow of water, and this is a machine, a material object that produces these calculations by virtue of the movement of its parts. Would that make this computer aware? No. Computers, this is how they work. If you substitute electricity for the water, it doesn't change anything. Electricity is just another form of matter. And so all of computers are and always will be, right, machines, and they will be matter which cannot produce awareness by virtue of the movements. Even artificial intelligence, as we see with this brain in a vat kind of thing here, you have this artificial brain. Artificial intelligence is not produced by increasing the awareness of a machine. It's using the same circuitry, and there is software which produces certain patterns which mimic what would happen in an intelligent mind. It can even, make it talk and pretend to be intelligent, but it's all determined by the programming. It's still a machine, and awareness cannot be produced by a material object by virtue of the movement of its parts. There are three different models of what mind could be. Number one, it could be all physical, or physical with an offshoot called epiphenomenon, which I'll talk about in a minute. It could be all immaterial, which we are not even discussing because that's not a live option for most people in the Western world. And if it's all immaterial, then it's part of a pantheistic system, which we can't discuss now. But it could be both. It could be both immaterial, meaning the rational awareness operating with the brain. This is called dualism. Now, this brings us to objection number 3. Objection number 3 is, excuse me, I had a cough. Okay. Objection number 3 is, okay, you're so smart. Tell me the mechanism of action. How does the mind and the brain, how do they interact? How does the mind tell the brain stuff and the brain tells the mind stuff? Well, nobody really knows that. Right? That's a difficult thing to decide. But we know that rational awareness is immaterial, and we know the brain is material, and we know that they do interact. Do I have to know the details of how they interact to prove it? I remember reading that in 1930s, scientists were puzzled by the bumblebee, saying that its wings should not be able to provide the lift compared to its body mass. And there were lots of jokes about how it was the most impossible thing in the world, but there it is. They knew what the mechanism of action was. It was the flapping of the wings, but they didn't know how it could be pulled off. And now they do. But they didn't before. But if you had bumblebees in your backyard and they were flying around, and somebody said, and you said, "Wow, there's bumblebees flying in my backyard," and somebody said, "Yeah, prove how it can work. Tell me the mechanism of action." Well, that would be silly. You say, "Oh, I don't have to prove, with an engineering degree, how these wings can work. I just see it working." Another example, which takes me further afield, is the quantum particles. How do they come into existence out of nothing and go back into nothingness, out of the quantum vacuum? Well, it's not really nothing, but it's the quantum vacuum. And how do they get caused? Some scientists think they don't. There is no causation. They just pop in there somehow. And others say that they're caused, but they don't know how. And so the mechanism of action is not even known, if there is a mechanism of action. Yet they accept that the quantum particles exist. And if you don't like these examples, you can use 1,000 other examples, like, I don't know how my car works, I don't know how my TV works. You'd be amazed at how many things that I could not explain the mechanism of action that I see every day, and I see that they work. And so it's not necessary for us to be able to say how the mind and the brain interact with each other in order to know that they do. Remember that we said that we are aware, and we're rationally aware. And this is the third thing that I think is kind of a clincher, is agency. Now, I know, it is my experience, that I act in the world. I know this. I don't infer it. I don't doubt it. I just know it. I can lift my arm. I can put my arm down. I can lift my arm and pretend to put it down and put it back up. I can lift my arm and hold it there until I can't stand it anymore, and then I'll put it down. But if I had to, I could put it back up again. I control these actions out of my free choice. It doesn't even require a lot of deliberation. I don't have to have a lot of reasons. That's how I can move my body from place to place. I don't have to have a committee figure out what to do. And I certainly my body doesn't do it all by itself. I tell it what to do. I act in the world. I know that this is true. Now, there are people who say that what happens here is the brain takes different causal inputs, and the brain processes them just like a computer, and it tells my arm to go up. And then it tells me, the shadow self called epiphenomena, it tells me what it did. And so in this slide I have, so what did I decide to do? Here I'm a passive observer. I'm a receiver of information, but I am not an actor. The cause and effect relationship goes right through the body, into the brain, back out to the body, and then I get notified as this happens. That's the thing. Well, you know what? My experience is that I act in the world. And my mind tells my brain, hey, tell the arm to move up. Hey, tell the arm to move down. I'm the one who decides that. This epiphenomenon thing, doesn't even make sense to me, but even if it did, this goes completely contrary to my personal experience of being All right, now here comes my big point. Remember what we said before was, the materialist will say, what you see is what you get. And I say that's true. Look at the layers of this little guy's head here. First of all, there's a tree outside, and through the senses, in the brain, the information about the tree comes in. And then that's a green ring. And then the next concept ring means it is conceptualized by my brain, and perhaps by my mind as well, into something more than just sensory input of visual patterns, where I associate it with my memory and stuff, and I go, oh, that's a tree. I get it. There's the trunk, there's the leaves, right? And then the inner part is my awareness. Now I am directly aware of my awareness, of my being rationally aware and conscious in the world. I'm directly aware of that and of myself. I am indirectly aware of the objects in the external world that are mediated through the senses and through the conceptualization process into my awareness. Why would I reject what my awareness tells me, what I understand and know certainly that I exist and that I am aware like this? Why would I reject that in favor of things that are inferred from objects in the world and from different arguments and things? I say, what I see is what I get. What I see is that I am an agent in the world, and I have rational awareness that cannot be produced by matter by virtue of the movement of its parts. This is like completely. So this is the conclusion. This is how reality presents itself to me. I know that I exist as an agent, and that I'm aware directly, immediately, and with certainty. And there is no argument that could possibly convince me. So then the next question is, okay. So we're rationally aware and it's not material. That took a long time. But it's worth it. Question is now, how can we explain this rational consciousness that we have? I suppose theoretically you could say it's a brute fact. It just is. In this picture here, the Big Bang creates a physical universe, and that's me saying I can think. And then not the Big Bang, but something else. It just exists in me. Maybe I get it at birth. I get this little consciousness. It doesn't come from anything. It just pops into existence. That's one possibility. I don't see that as having a lot of explanatory power. I don't see this as being the best alternative, but it's one of them. Here's another one, is there are people who say that at the Big Bang, along with rocks and trees, was created little tiny bits of awareness. Now, I don't even know what that means. And that those little bits of awareness are somehow associated with our bodies and our brains. But they came into existence at the Big Bang, as products of the Big Bang. All right, then, what is the source of them? Would be whatever the source of the Big Bang is, would be the source of these things. But this seems kind of hard to figure for me. Right? See, and one of these get attached to my brain somehow. Another one is, there is a transcendent source of consciousness. Which goes back past the Big Bang, which goes beyond the Big Bang. And that's how in one way or another, I participate in that rational mind, or that rational mind imbues me with its power of thought, or whatever. But there is a transcendent source of consciousness here. If there is a transcendent source of awareness, then it itself must be rationally aware. It could be more, but it can't be less. Because how could something that's not rationally aware be the source of all rational awareness and consciousness. And so to recap, we talked about the standpoint of consciousness being the essential I, that awareness cannot be produced by matter by virtue of the movement of its parts. Also, we're rationally aware. Also, we are agents in the world, down a little lower, right? Counter arguments about neurology. We've shown that correlation is not the same as causation, much less identity. And we've given the analogy of the musician and the instrument. Second objection is, or counter argument, is that computers are or may become thinking machines and therefore aware. But that's confusing two kinds of rationality, behavior and awareness. And computers work, as we described, by electricity, guided through paths, and they are still matter machines. The third objection is the mind-body mechanism. If we can't explain it, we can't believe in it. And that's not true. I gave counterexamples. The explanation for a material understanding, there's two kinds. One is material reductionism, meaning that the mind just is the brain. And another one is kind of a fudge, saying that the mind is something that's kind of on top of the brain, that doesn't feel material, that doesn't participate in the causal process whatsoever. That makes no sense to me. And so what I have is what you see is what you get. An immaterial rational awareness. What kind of source could it have? Well, you could say just because, but that's not a very good explanation. You could say that little bits of awareness were created in the Big Bang, and then the cause, the transcendent source of these things would be whatever the cause of the Big Bang is. And we have found in a separate talk that the Big Bang does have a transcendent cause, and so then there would be a transcendent source for this. Or it could be something which it's outside of the Big Bang. It is a transcendent source of its own. And then that would be a transcendent source too. And so the transcendent source is the best explanation. So to recap the recap, rational awareness is not material. It is caused by an external transcendent source. It is a transcendent source, which itself is rationally aware. It could be more, but it couldn't be less. I believe this is a powerful argument.